Let's talk about lymph massage, chapter 16. So lymph massage has several names that are interchangeable. You can call it lymph massage, lymphatic drainage, lymph drainage, lymphatic drainage massage, lymphatic massage, and so on. This is a system of light circular strokes at a particular speed and rhythm. So we're going extremely slow with this specific modality. Typically, they tell you that the pressure that you are using is equivalent to about the pressure of a nickel placed on your skin that you are slowly dragging across the skin. So when we're doing this, we're only really trying to palpate that superficial lymphatic system. So lymph massage also follows the direction of the lymph pathway. So it's important to know the direction of the lymphatic system and where all those nodes and nodules and capillaries are headed. So lymph massage is used to move out edematous tissues into the lymph system so that it can do its job and clean it out. Excuse me. Let's talk a little bit about the history of lymph massage. So Alexander von Winnewater from the 19th century of Austria originally developed massage and compression treatments for lymphedema. And then in the 1930s, we had Dr. Emil Vater. So this is who a lot of us will see online, Vater's lymphatic massage. A lot of our modern day lymphatic massage is based off of Emil Vater's work. He was credited for rediscovering the benefits of lymphatic massage. So here's the lymphatic system. We got a little picture to the right to kind of help you out a little bit. So the lymphatic system is a system of vessels and nodes, and this is supplementary to the blood vascular system. So they're kind of intertwined, okay? This provides a pathway for the fluids of the circular system to return back to the heart. So the lymphatic system pulls out interstitial fluid from all the cells in the body, goes into the capillaries, and then again is filtered through that lymphatic system. Once it's in that lymphatic system, then we call it lymph. So it's not technically lymph until it's in the system. So lymphatic system goes in one direction. It has valves that only allow for the fluid to move in one direction so that you can't, what's the word I'm looking for? You can't go backwards with the fluid. So first of all, what starts the lymphatic system? It starts with that interstitial fluid. This fluid then enters your lymph capillary. So you have your blood capillaries. Well, now we have the lymph capillaries that are intertwined in there. At the end, this is when the lymph re-enters the venous flow. We're going to go through the whole system, but this is just kind of, the beginning and the end. So it re-enters the venous blood flow in the subclavian vein, and this is at the junction of the internal jugular. So over here in this picture, that internal jugular is on that right side of the body. They also call this angulus venosus, or the venous angle. Or the venous angle. So those are also interchangeable medical terms. But this is the main purpose of the immune system, is to have that lymph go into the capillaries and then return the blood back to the venous angle. Let's talk about all the vessels involved in this. You have your initial lymph vessel, your lymph capillaries, lymph trunks, and lymph ducts. So the initial lymph vessel is the smallest lymph vessel. They're permeable, so they allow, for liquids to enter, right? And are capable of absorbing fluid and proteins from the tissues. So if I go over here, excuse me, you'll see the blood capillary and how the lymphatic vessels are kind of intertwined in here just to kind of pull out that fluid. It's like a giant filtration system. Then we have our lymph capillaries, all right? Lymph vessel goes into the blood capillary to become the lymph capillary. These are also tiny vessels found in most of the organs and the tissues of the body that filter your interstitial fluid. So this is the fluid from the cells. Look at the picture on the bottom here. All this fluid is like the blue, right? These are all the little cells in the fluid. So what it's doing is taking that fluid, pumping it through the lymphatic system, getting rid of any invaders, and returning the healthier fluid back to the jugular, or the venous angle, we'll call it. The next vessel would be your lymph trunks. So these are larger lymph vessels that conduct lymph flow towards the ducts. Lymph ducts are the largest lymph vessel. They connect the venous system at the venous angle, which returns your lymph fluid to the heart. We do have a video here that I'll share that kind of goes over how the lymph system works a little bit better than maybe I can share. This is a YouTube video. I'll also try to remember to add this to the description so that you can watch it.
Let's say you're at the airport. You're waiting in line to get through security. You're in your socks, in public, and you're wrestling with those plastic bins, and people are yelling at you about dumping liquids and taking your laptop out of your bag. But even with a certain amount of chaos, the line moves pretty quickly. I mean, it should, theoretically, because really everyone has the same goal, to get to where they need to be. Now, you probably think at this point that I'm setting you up to talk about stress or anxiety or something, but I am not. Instead, I want you to imagine that security line as being like your blood, moving through your high-pressured circulatory system. And you, my friend, are not just some impatient traveler in a hurry to catch the next plane to Seattle. You are a bit of blood plasma. And the biggest concern of everyone in your queue is just to get delivered to their destination. But the problem with rushing stuff through a blood vessel or through a security line is that if it moves too fast, you run the risk that something bad might get through. So in the case of the line at the airport, every now and then, the security people funnel some random folks over to a slower line for a full pat-down and a bag check. And that is kind of what your lymphatic system does. It takes up some extra fluid, and while it's ultimately helping it get to its destination, it runs a background check to make sure it's legit. It may not be as well known as some of your other more popular organ systems, but your lymphatic system quietly plays a vital supporting role to both your cardiovascular and immune systems. For one thing, it maintains your homeostasis by eventually returning most of the fluid that has been diverted back into your blood. Which is good, because if it didn't, your ankles would swell up like balloons, your lungs would fill with fluid, and your blood volume and pressure would drop to the point where your body would just give up and you would die. But the lymphatic system isn't just another security line. It also has a series of checkpoints that are staffed by special security officers that have the ability to take care of small infections on the spot. Or if they really don't like the looks of what they've found, they can alert the whole immune system to take it down. So for keeping your blood volume levels where they need to be, for keeping you from collapsing from low blood pressure, and for preventing you from dying from a staph infection every time you scrape your elbow, you have to thank the unsung hero of your anatomy, your lymphatic system. Structurally speaking, your lymphatic system consists of three main parts. The first is just your lymph. It's a watery fluid that flows through your lymphatic system. Much of your lymph starts out as blood plasma that gets forced out of your capillaries, way down in the capillary beds, where the leakage helps the exchange of nutrients and gases between the blood and the capillaries and the hungry cells in your tissues. The blood capillaries reabsorb some of the fluid, but a lot gets left behind. So much of the rest of your lymphatic system works to soak it up and get it back to where it needs to go, inspecting it along the way. For example, you have a network of lymphatic vessels that help reabsorb the fluid at about about 600 or 700 lymph nodes, which are basically checkpoints that monitor and cleanse lymph as it filters through. Then there are special lymphoid organs like the spleen, thymus, adenoids, and tonsils, as well as other lymphoid tissues throughout the body. Some of these organs and tissues house special defensive cells of the immune system to fight infection by gobbling up bacteria and other harmful antigens, all of which we'll get a lot more into in upcoming lessons. Others, like the thymus and spleen, provide a nursery for maturing immune cells called lymphocytes. But to understand the special supporting role that your lymphatic system plays in your body, let's start with its origins in the capillary beds of your circulatory system. You'll recall that these beds are where the capillaries carry blood from your arterioles and your arteries before that, and feed blood into your venules and eventually your veins. This is where the transfer of nutrients and waste takes place, as blood pressures force plasma out of the arterial end of the capillaries and into the interstitial fluid between the cells of whatever tissue you happen to be in. And most of that fluid gets drawn right back into the capillaries on the venous end thanks to osmotic pressure. But some is left behind. Of the 20 liters a day that's forced through the arteriolar end of all the capillaries all over your body, only 17 liters is taken back up by the venous end. Those other 3 liters? That becomes your lymph. It's almost immediately picked up by nearby lymphatic capillaries that wind their way in and among the blood capillaries, and they're really well suited for their job. Lymphatic capillaries are made of loosely overlapping endothelial cells that look kind of like roofing shingles, forming little flap-like valves that only open in one direction. So when the pressure in the interstitial space becomes greater than the pressure inside the lymphatic capillary, the flaps push open and take in fluid to relieve the pressure. Once the fluid is inside a lymphatic capillary, we can officially call it lymph. Then it flows through successively larger lymphatic vessels to collecting vessels and then the larger trunks, and finally into one of 2 big ducts that feed back into the lowest pressure area of the circulatory system. The right lymphatic duct drains all the lymph collected from the upper right area of the torso, as well as the right arm and the right sides of the head and thorax, and feeds them all into the internal jugular vein. The larger thoracic duct takes lymph from the rest of the body and dumps it into the subclavian vein. Overall, these vessels work a lot like your veins do. They operate under very low pressure, have a series of valves that prevent backflow, and are helped along a bit by smooth muscle in the vessel walls that keep the fluid moving. Okay, so the lymphatic system takes extra fluid that's squeezed out of the blood capillaries and basically mops it up. That sounds handy, but as a living thing that wants to stay alive, what's in it for you exactly? Well, remember, we're talking about recovering 3 liters of blood fluid per day. That's more than half your total blood volume. If that weren't returned to your circulatory system, you'd be looking at a serious drop in blood pressure and little to no oxygen delivery or waste pickup. Plus, any blockage in the lymph system, like from a tumor that obstructs one of your vessels, can be really dangerous, resulting in edema or swelling that can constrain blood flow and lead to serious complications. And finally, don't forget that your lymph also plays a key role in the function of your immune system. Say you scrape your elbow and some bad stuff, like the staphylococcus bacteria that's covering your entire body right now, infiltrates some of the loose areolar connective tissue under your skin. Since that tissue is full of interstitial fluid that drains into your lymphatics, which ultimately drain to your heart, you're gonna want to vanquish those bad guys before they have a chance to wreak any havoc. Whatever will you do? Well, this is where your lymph nodes come in. Your body's main lymphoid organs, the lymph nodes, are where your lymph gets close and regular inspection by its resident immune cells, lymphocytes. Depending on what kind of troublemaker they find in the fluid, the lymphocytes might trigger the release of resident macrophages to attack unwanted microorganisms, or they might activate the general immune system outside of the node if they need extra support. The details of how that happens we will get to next time, but for now, just understand that lymphocytes are found in and mature in the loose reticular connective tissue that makes up a large part of the nodes and most of your other lymphoid organs. Now, if a node is overwhelmed by whatever invader it's trying to quell, it may become inflamed. You can actually feel some of your nodes if you poke around the sides of your neck. They feel like little bumps. Yeah, they are. And noticeably enlarged lymph nodes are often an early diagnostic sign of disease or infection, which is why doctors are always feeling around under your jawline during checkups. But your lymph nodes aren't the system's only checkpoints. You've also got a few special outposts placed at strategic entry points to particularly sensitive tissues, like those in the respiratory and digestive tracts. These are called mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues, or MALTs, because they can be found in mucous membranes around the body outside of the lymphatic vessels. Your tonsils are some of the largest collections of these tissues, which together form a ring around the entrance of the pharynx. There, they can inspect everything you eat and breathe and try to remove any pathogens before they enter the GI tract or lungs. It's a pretty big job, actually, which is why sore throats and swollen tonsils are a common sign of a cold or other infection. Another collection of malts called Peyer's patches are in the distal portion of the small intestine, providing another checkpoint along the GI tract. And contrary to popular myth, your appendix is not useless because it too contains a bunch of lymphoid tissue and is conveniently located where it can destroy any remaining bacteria before it can breach the intestinal wall during absorption. Exactly how your lymph and immune cells detect and destroy the unwanted visitors that might otherwise kill you is what we're going to be talking about for the remainder of this course. But for now, you learned how your unsung lymphatic system supports cardiovascular function by collecting, filtering, and returning interstitial fluid back into the bloodstream via a system of lymphatic vessels. We also talked about the system's major role in fighting off infection and how lymph nodes and other lymphoid organs and malt areas house antigen-attacking lymphocytes that provide crucial support to the immune system. Thank you to our headmaster of learning, Linnea Boyev, and thank you to all of our Patreon patrons whose monthly contributions help make Crash Course possible, not only for themselves, but for everybody everywhere. If you like Crash Course and want to help us keep making videos like this one, you can go to patreon.com/Crash Course. This episode was filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio. It was written by Kathleen Yale. The script was edited by Blake DiPastino, and our consultant is Dr. Brandon Jackson. It was directed by Nicholas Jenkins, edited by Nicole Sweeney. Our sound designer is Michael Aranda, and the graphics team is Thought Cafe.
All right, hopefully that helped clear things up a little bit. All right, we're going to kind of go through those lymph organs again, a little more detail. So you have your bone marrow. Your bone marrow actually makes something called B lymphocytes. So think B for bone marrow. Your thymus makes T lymphocytes. So again, T for thymus. So those are a couple little clues to help you remember which lymphocytes are made where. Your spleen is an organ that is a lymphatic organ. It acts as a filter for the blood, which is similar to, let's say, a giant lymph node. Then we have our actual lymph nodes that are, they said, 700 through the body. The major ones you're going to think of as around under the jaw, the armpit, the axillary area, the groin area tend to house a lot of lymph nodes. Your tonsils are a lymph organ. And your malts, so your mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. So the pathways. The main thing I want you to remember is your upper right portion of your body is going to be called the right lymphatic duct. So everything in that upper quadrant is going to drain all to that side into the right subclavian vein. The rest of the body drains on the left side. So just remember, there's a little bit on the right, the rest all goes to the left. That's also why typically when people are having lymphedema or some type of fluid buildup, a lot of times the left side is affected unless it was due to an injury on that right side. So the target of lymph massage is to target the superficial lymph capillaries just a few millimeters below the skin surface. So your lymph quadrants, there's 4 of them. It's going to be your upper right, your upper left, your lower right, and your lower left. All the quadrants drain either into, again, your right lymphatic duct, which is just your upper right quadrant. All the rest drain into your thoracic duct. There's also something called watershed. This is the separation of flow of lymph into different drainage territories. Some of your major lymph nodes, again, your inguinal nodes are going to be in the groin area. Your axillary nodes are going to be in the armpit area. So this is typically where you'll feel those inflamed nodes a little easier superficially. Then we have our cervical nodes in the neck. All right, so you have your deep, which are along the carotid artery and the jugular vein. Then your superficial lymph nodes in the cervical area, which is the side of and over your SCM. So this would be in this section along those neck muscles there. Then you have something called the ring of nodes. This is along the jawline and the occipital region. So this is typically what your doctor is feeling when they're trying to see if you have infection. Then we have our lymph obstructions. So edema is a condition where excess fluid is retained in the tissues. It often leads to swelling. So you have your ordinary edema, which is temporary, and your chronic edema, which is a lot more serious. Your ordinary edema is often due to inactivity, poor diet, stress, fatigue, and local injuries. So that could also be if you notice you're laying around a little bit more, or you maybe go on vacation to a place where there's a different altitude. A lot of times you'll notice some swelling in the feet or ankles. So that would be your temporary edema if you're more sedentary, sitting more, or in a change of altitude. Our chronic edema, which is more serious, is often called lymphedema. So this is what we are addressing typically during a lymph massage. Yes, we can address your ordinary edema. It's a lot safer, I would say, but the chronic edema, the lymphedema, is the main reason for this lymphatic massage. So the primary lymphedema disease is abnormal accumulation of tissue fluid due to malformation of blood vessels in lymph. This is usually congenital, usually restricted to one area such as the legs. Then we have our secondary lymphedema disease. This is an abnormal accumulation of tissue fluid due to an obstruction. Oftentimes, this is post-surgical from either scar tissue, injury, surgery, infection, radiation, or inflammation. So this is what happens from a specific cause. Contraindications for lymph massage: acute infection and fever, which is for everything. Inflammation accompanied by any sign of infection. Uncontrolled cardiac problems. Kidney disease. Acute tuberculosis. Venous obstructions, which would be your phlebitis, thrombosis, embolisms. Bleeding or hemorrhage or weeping sores. Edema from an unknown origin. If this person has developed a swelling and have no reason to have the swelling, no memory of why it happened, they should seek medical attention. Do not work on them. Or if they have severe asthma. When should we perform lymph massage? This is to reduce your edema or swelling, reduce inflammation in the absence of infection. If the infection is gone and there's still fluid buildup and inflammation, this is when we're going to bring those skills with us and try to do the lymphatic drainage on this area. It also helps reduce swelling from an injury. It's also relaxing. So it relaxes superficial tissues and muscles. You do not have to have anything wrong with you to get a lymphatic massage. You can actually just go for the wellness benefits of it. Though it's a little more boring, but you can just go when there's no issue. It helps detoxify the body because it gets that lymph flowing, helps reduce stress, improves your sleep, and reduces pain. Just like every other type of massage. Hold on, my dog's barking. Okay, all's well, I think. Pitting edema and palpation. So pitting edema is a depression that occurs when pressure is applied with a finger or thumb, a digit. Most lymph nodes can only be felt if they are swollen. So remember that. We're typically not just going, oh, that's a lymph node when we're palpating somebody unless there is an issue going on. Enlarged nodes are a sign of infection or other health problems. So with the pitting edema, what is happening here, we have different grades, grade 1 through 1 through 4. So grade 4 would be, worst case scenario. So pitting edema usually happens if there's a swollen area and you kind of push on it with your finger, and the mark that you made from pushing your finger, that indent, remains there for a little while. Typically, our skin will bounce back, and there's no evidence that you pressed on that area. Well, with pitting edema, there is. So typically, it'll go back to its original shape, but you'll have that digit impression. First, before you do any kind of lymphatic massage, we are going to drain the lymph nodes in the area being worked to allow movement and avoid swelling of those nodes. So again, remember my whole theory with the traffic. You want to clear the lane in front of you. Well, in this case, we'll pretend that the lymph nodes are the stop sign, or the man holding the stop sign, the flagger. We got to wait for the flagger to let us through. So we have to, palpate those lymph nodes and drain them before doing the area. So again, our pressure is going to be 1 to 8 ounces per square inch, or the weight of a nickel. Direction. The direction is always towards the heart. So we can do circular, L or J strokes, different techniques for lymphatic massage. But remember, we're always going towards that heart, or in this case, towards that node. Because if we're working on the lower body, we're not going straight up to the heart. We're kind of going towards the groin. The rhythm is very, very slow, very light strokes. We're not in a hurry here. Too much pressure, this is why it's light, can temporarily collapse those lymph capillaries. So we don't want those lymph capillaries to collapse, because that means the lymph is not flowing through there, and that's defeating the purpose. So that's why this is a very light, superficial modality, so that we can kind of assist that lymph in the direction it's already going, to get things moving and drain out any areas that have stagnation. And there we go. Till next time.